Днес в залата при нас гостува Марина Фокидис от Атина в рамките на проекта School for Artists, визуални диалози, близки срещи, част втора, Back to School. В рамките на този проект ще имаме няколко визити. На 9 имаме презентация в галерия Кредо Боном с куратор Мерве Елверен от Истанбул. Ноември месец ще ни гостуват кураторите на следващите документа и декември месец ще ни гостуват двама куратори от Штутгарт, от Kunstverein Штутгарт, които курират Берген Асембли, голямо биенале, което се случва в Берген, Норвегия. Общо взето идеята на проекта ни е да отново да положим някакви ударни усилия за отваряне на българската сцена за съвременно изкуство, защото се забелязва, че има някакъв момент на събиране на някакви енергии, на отваряне на нови пространства, на събиране на някаква критична маса от хора и има нужда като че ли да направим такива ударни усилия за подновяване на някакъв международен диалог. Марина Фокидис, която е с нас днес, е куратор, който живее и работи в Атина, който е основател на Kunsthalle Athena. Тя ще разкаже малко повече за тази особена институция, от която можем да се вдъхновим и в нашите конкретни условия. Куратор, който има големи заслуги за отварянето на гръцката сцена за съвременно изкуство. Куратор, който е курирал гръцкия павилион, който е курирал и последното издание на документа, което се случи в Касъл и Атина. Паралелно и съответно тя курирала програмата, която се случи в Атина. Няма да отнемам повече време. Ще дам думата на Марина.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's kind of funny that I heard so many times the word Athena from what you were saying, but I am from Thessaloniki actually, so I live somewhere which is much closer to Sofia than to Athena, which means many things, as my point in more of what I will be saying is kind of beyond the identity politics, more the idea of interlocalities and affinities that have to do with mind, body, and geographical proximities. I want to thank very much the people that invited me here, Lucejar, Yara, Kaismir, sorry for the pronunciation, Karin, and the ICA, which I know for quite a bit, a long time. Yes, I'm here now invited as after many years since I met Yara and Lucejar and Pablo in the Tirana Biennial in 2001 as a curator of the things you heard. But it's kind of fun because at that point, when we were very young with Yara, she had just quoted a text that I was writing as a student, starting to become a curator, and without knowing who I am, but she was trying to find where I am and who I am because of where I was saying back then, as it was the beginning of my curatorial endeavor, how curating is wonderful and I want to be a curator, but curating is also sweeping the floor, cleaning the windows, dusting the furniture, the works. It's too much labor. And then I thought, yeah, but that will be the beginning, the first year. It's been like 20-something years since then, and curating is still mopping the floors, dusting the windows, the furniture. It's too much labor. Plus, the annoying fact this time is that you have to greet the prime minister, the mayor, or whoever the next morning without having slept at all because you were dusting the floor, cleaning the windows, and all that. So it's not the easier job. Sometimes we keep hearing, oh, the curator of this, the curator. So it's an overcharged word. But in reality is a kind of a professor that is like the orchestrator of a gathering, in my case. And this is what I want to talk more about today, is the kind of living together and its entanglements. It's like kind of adventures. And to think of the exhibitions, the arts center, an art magazine or whatever, as a way of living together. As we see the world developing, we're always trying to live apart. You know, all these kind of unions that once was a given with its bad and good sides. Be it many unions, I will say a union that it's more with the proximity to me, European Union, for example, are becoming this kind of hyper nationalist fragmented spaces that still provide some funding or like a unified funding, but or whatever this is, but in reality they don't somehow answer to any kind of unit. Everybody within them, they want a kind of independency, which is fine, because yes, a multiplicity is something that is, it's a set of many independence, but the weird fact, or maybe the normal fact, but it's just the circle now, is that these independencies are fighting with each other. So be it individuals, be it countries, be it locations, be it topographies, be it movements, we all fight with each other. So let's say that one of the questions will be how to re-find unions or unities or gatherings or ways of living in coexistence or even more symbiotic in kind of exchange. Now, why, I mean, I will go to this image after. I want just to start with a few questions that we will keep in our mind. Of course, I will be discussing about some curatorial endeavors, mostly the Kunsthalle Athena, a pirate, smaller institution that I did in Greece, a magazine that I'm publishing, and it's been going on for like almost 7 years now, South as a State of Mind, and Documenta 14, the bilocational documenta that happened in Athens and in Kassel at the same time. But I want that we think of all those as kind of gatherings, and so I want to set some questions that have to do with biennials, magazines, and public spaces, let's say as such. And the questions are the following. How can we describe the space within an event, in which an event, an exhibition, a biennial, or a periodical, or a publication occupy? I mean, why I'm asking about space? Basically, the questions have to be with space, time, and space and time more than anything. Why I'm asking with the space? We all know that half of our lives are spent in a kind of non-space space, and not exactly non-place space, the social media, be it. And so our interaction, no matter where we are, it's also spread in this kind of more virtual or bodiless entity. So how can we describe then a space where bodies exist, right? And not only minds, like the social media. Another question is if, I mean, in the same, a sub-question to this will be if geographical or territorial distinctions are still accurate to describe this space. We keep hearing about Venice Biennial with national pavilions, Documenta in Kassel or Athens, the other biennial of Thessaloniki or of, you know, another country of Berlin and all this. But what do they mean, really? How many of us recently have been experiencing these events or other events, or even our own private relationship through the Facebook or the Instagram? You know, so what does it mean? As a kind of a extension to this is also what national identity means in some ways or others. Of course it does many things, but I think in the 2000s and more, in the millennium, the ideas of this have been changing. Also, how can we define the chronological duration of an event or a one-off exhibition or a periodical or a mega biennial occupy? What does this mean again? We know that, for example, a biennial or an exhibition is 2 months or it happens every 5 years, but what does this mean? What has been happening, what remains after this? What has been happening before, during the communication of the event? How this can be repeated? Maybe the negative space, if we speak to artists, like in all terms, like when you paint or not paint, the negative space, so the negative space of time and the actual time of an event are now merging. And so 2 parameters already, space and time, cannot be defined in the terms that we were defining just 10 years ago, or 5 years ago even. And then maybe you've been questioning by now why I have this image on the screen. I don't identify with this Barbie doll of Greece, although this is the Greek Barbie. But nevertheless, this is a popular item of the 80s, a popular item that was somehow distributed to children, so in a kind of a age that you're shaping your mind about the other or other people. And it has also a description that, in my computer it's impossible to read, but maybe there you can read it a bit, but I will point out some facts. This is the 80s, and the Greek Barbie is a very happy woman that goes around from one place to another with donkeys, and is very hospitable and loves tourists and is happy and singing while working and all this. And it's kind of fun because in the 80s, like late 70s, 80s, in Greece we have a hyper urbanization. After the war, Greece was very, very poor. So there were a couple, and also after the Civil War, there were a couple of dictatorships also, or like a prolonged dictatorship going on that culminated in the late 60s, 70s. And what happened was that everybody left their villages and somehow concentrated in the mega cities. So we have two cities, Athens of 5 million, Thessaloniki of 1 million, in a country of 9 million people. So you can understand there were no donkeys, no time to ride with a donkey from a place to a place, no time to laugh or stuff. Everybody was working their whole bodies off in order to survive. And condominiums, lots of condominiums that they were built erratically. I don't know how many of you have been to Athens specifically. In Thessaloniki, it's a little bit more civilized, but the living is it's not like here, there is not space, basically, for the people that they live all together. Yeah, the Parthenon is still there, but thank God it's a bit elevated, because otherwise it would have been a condominium as well. They will be down, but, so you can see it. It's important what I say. The other reason why I have this doll is because apparently this doll is wearing our national costume, which is these clothes that you see. And this applies to any national costume. Actually, this national costume was decided by the wife of a Bavarian king, King Otto, that was the first prime minister of democratic Greece. This is not called colonization, right? Never mind if he was a German king or not. This was in the early 20s, and it was as the first prime minister of Greece after the Ottoman Empire was, Kapodistrias was elected, but assassinated in a very short time of his period, like I don't remember, but some months, or like less than a year. So King Otto from Bavaria came to help Greece to somehow become a state. And he did very well, I have to say. But I think he might have now, looking at it in retrospect, disregard some facts, that Germany and Greece is not exactly the same place, weather-wise, history-wise, attitude-wise, people-wise. So yes, he did a wonderful state. He started back then a wonderful state in Germanic terms. Now, how people could somehow follow and make the state bigger is a question, but who cares about people anyway, Whoever, it's always a little bit like that. So I'm talking about this because I will be coming to questions as such, even from the role of a curator. Now, his wife, Amalia, a wonderful queen, and the wife of the prime minister of the first democratic state of Greece, I will be repeating that because, of course, this is not part of the official colonization story, decided that there should be somehow worked on that uniform that you see the Barbie wearing, and also it's our national sort of costume. And she worked in a kind of a uniform that somehow brought some European ideals and styles, but also kept something from the Ottoman time. So you see the hat, but then you see also the Victorian skirt and stuff, and this is how we all reunited under one identity. But as you know, because I think the same was happening here, geographically, but also Greece. Greece was made full of very many diverse minorities. Actually, during the Ottoman Empire, that maybe was a bit more tolerant than the German Empire, on quote marks. There was never a German Empire, but let's call it that for the sake of this meeting. Differences were tolerated better. Yes, there was one sultan that was taking the money, but differences were allowed, somehow constructing this mosaic of this topography where we are, an important mosaic. I have some feelings sometimes that the Greek crisis that is happening now, I mean, it has been happening since the 2009 until now, so it's not a crisis anymore, a normality, maybe has its roots to this kind first proto-Germanic country or free state that among which we were civilized. You know, from Ottomans we became Europeans, let's put it that way. Or from, you know, minorities we became a majority. Why I'm saying this, and sorry if I'd like to introduce some words that it's kind of interesting also in the idea of looking at another state or looking at another reality, also in the idea of curating an exhibition, or maybe even making work that they had not have to do with our own locality. So the words I like to introduce, and through these words we can see the rest of my presentation, are the word methexis. It's a Greek word. For me, methexis is a kind of a curatorial process. It means the unaccountable, something that we don't expect. I don't know if here's, yeah, there is actually there is an error that I forgot to change before coming here, I wanted. It says uncountable, but it's actually the unaccountable next to the methexis. It means something you don't expect to happen, but it nevertheless does. And in the ancient Greek form of theater, in the tragedy actually, the audience was represented by the chorus. Something that was, not the audience, the people were represented by the chorus on stage. For example, you had the queens and the kings and everything that was happening to them, and then behind you had the people speaking. If the audiences, which were the people, the real people, seeing themselves being performed, didn't agree with what the chorus was saying, they could stop at any moment the theater and change the plot. Because the ancient tragedy was a form of applying politics. Actually, a kind of more imaginative form than a political speech. I mean, the same can happen here. If you disagree, please feel free to interact me in a methectic process. In a kind of a more, I mean, Plato, and then used by Lacan, thought the word methexis, which derives, it's a Platonic sort of term, is the relationship of a particular and a form. And to make it this much, much simple and colloquial, it means that if we are many beautiful people in that room today, we are not many beautiful individuals. There is a form of beauty on top of us, and we are many particulars of this form that it's in our heads. So beauty doesn't happen only in your body, in your body, in your body, and in my body, but it's also here in the middle, between you and I. And, or whoever you and I, between you, between everyone, which means that our interaction is also the form of beauty, and something we cannot control. And which means also to think about the entanglement of individualism and the kind of virtue of collectivity. By somehow limiting to individuals, we are lacking the form of beauty that it's anyway in the air, and that we are the particulars of knowledge, of beauty, of any form. What I'm trying to say again is being beautiful is not a kind of an individual virtue. It is a collective virtue. You're just a particular of this beauty that is around us, and that we are somehow responsible to recreate again and again and again. In that case, my question is, as a politician or as a curator or as an artist, what makes you entitled to speak of somebody else? there is the form of entitlement in English that it's actually a good and a bad thing at the same time. We want to give the force of entitlement, let's say, to newcomers in our country or to refugees or to people to vote, but there is also this other kind of force of entitlement or form of entitlement of, again, I would go to the like old example, German king that was brought up, Bavarian king that was brought up in another location to feel entitled to find the way that people in another location will develop and live. And there is also another form of entitlement to any curator or any artist that goes to another place for a short period of time and somehow feels entitled to speak about a locality that might be exotic but has nothing to do with his own understanding without even forming this kind of beauty, this kind of form of beauty. Again, why I'm saying this, because I really believe that everything we do as cultural practitioners, be it artists or curators, has to be somehow grounded in the place where we are being active, which is basically a relationship between the place we come from and a place we are being active, plus the in-between. Here I'm going to give you a quote for this relationship and also the methexis of a philosopher that recently died, and his name died in in his late age, Michel Serres. And he wrote a little beautiful book, among others, that was called the Troubadour of Knowledge. So somehow he refers to this, troubadour is, the person that goes from place to place and sings. And he was talking a lot of how the knowledge we acquire about the world is through our bodies as well as through our mind and through reading. And he describes very beautifully a scene that, or an example that we can put our bodies to understand this kind of third space where this methexis happen between one beautiful particular and another beautiful particular in this form. How do we find this form? He describes this kind of exercise of a brave swimmer that jumps into black waters, like deep waters, and has to cross a very rough passage. And he says that in the first part, when we jump to these waters, we always have a reference, and we can see the place where we left from. So we know where we left, we know where we belong. In the last part, which is the third part, we always see the place where we arrive. So we are aware of our destination. We are here, we arrived. But there is a middle part where you see no land, not from where you left and not where you're going. The kind of trick, in order to arrive where you want to be, is to find a way to balance yourself in that waters that has nothing to do with what you know or what you believe you're going to find. And if you balance, then you might find things that you never thought that existed. And this is the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh place between where you are and where you want to be. Does this make sense, or it's too abstract for everybody? I mean, please interact again. Now I'm going to go a little bit to more concrete examples. And I will start with this Kunsthalle Athena, an institution that, I call it institution because for me it was an institution. There are many people that are saying, oh, no, it's not good, it's an independent space, but for me an independent space is and should be an institution. A relationship is an institution, a personal relationship, a private between two lovers is an institution anyway. So I like to think relationships and exchange as institutional. Maybe then we can somehow change the idea or the institutions that they exist around us. So Kunsthalle Athena was this space that started among the worst part, which was the beginning of the Greek crisis in 2010. It was kind of a period where, yes, we lost all our references together with our jobs, and every kind of, it sounds tragic, but it was and still is, but now we are used to it. And also we lost any kind of, let's say, plan you had for the future or security or anything you might But this happened very, very fast. Like, we didn't have time to prepare for such a thing. And then we went, as you know, about the Greek crisis, one day in the bank, and you couldn't even take your money, which means your savings, from the bank, because there was the capital controls. And there were a lot of things in the news about this that we didn't expect, and a lot of explanations that now I know, because every Greek person became a small economist, but back then didn't make any sense. And so, having lost all the jobs and the ground from their feet, we thought the best thing is to maybe use our free time to create an institution, which is exactly the time where you don't do this, you know? And we thought, okay, let's also find a kind of a representative building for this institution, and we found a ruin, a complete ruin. I mean, with a roof, but you will see, like on the right-hand side, you see, or I don't know, right for you too, you see one of the walls. It was like an old neoclassical building that was a complete ruin and somehow survived the urbanization. Why Kunsthalle Athena, this name? First of all, because we wanted to be part of a brand. So it's like opening a McDonald's, a pirate McDonald's, but serving good food. But immediately you are recognized as a McDonald's, so the audience is guaranteed. So we are part of the Kunsthalle. Immediately when we opened Kunsthalle Zurich, Kunsthalle like congratulate us for becoming part of their family. And also because it's a time where Greece and Germany was in extreme like rivalry between them. Like you saw every day in Greece, poor Merkel with the Hitler mustache and all these people, and also you saw every time in the German newspapers like really slandering about Greeks, that they're using the German taxpayer money to have vacation, to have coffees, and images of Athens and Greece with a lot of people and youth being outside having a coffee, because it's so hard for somebody to understand that when you have no job and the sun is shining 360 days, you know, a year, you will spend most probably your time outside in a cafe as opposed to commit suicide. But then again, as the year passed, unfortunately, the rate of suicide in Greece was increased to 1,200%. It's huge. Yeah, it's not as big as Sweden yet, but we didn't have this issue. Now we have, of course. Mostly it was elders with their people that they lost their loans. It was always economical reasons behind, until we had a pharmacist that hung himself publicly on the Parliament Square, a pensioner. But at that time, you know, people in the beginning just populated the cafes under the sun, you know, which is something that you see in all the countries that there is warm and like, you know, mostly under the equator. The only thing we had was this ruin that was given to us by a developer that wanted or dreamed to create in the downtown Athens a kind of a art neighborhood, but never managed because the crisis hit, and because also it was a very booming business around, which was the prostitution. And in times of crisis, prostitution booms even more, especially with the immigration crisis, like, you know. And also, it was the time where, so no money, and the prostitution didn't allow that. On your right-hand side, you have, because it's kind of interesting, I chose this work to show you, a work by an artist called Kostis Velonis. It's just a video of a page of a 60s magazine clipped on the wall. So the page is moving. And the title of this work is, How Can You Think Freely Under the Shadow of a Temple? And this refers to our previous identity that we always refer to, but has not so much to do with who we are today, the ancient Greek identity. Actually, the ancient Greek identity has been colonized and reappropriated heavily by the Enlightenment. And actually, when we hear ancient Greece, we always think about Aristotle and the logic and the philosopher and all the kind of more pagan and more mystic part even the anarchic, as I call them, philosophers, the cynics, Diogenes, which they were proclaiming about dispossession. The man left his house and went to live in a kind of a pot, are being forgotten a little bit. So when we think ancient Greece, basically we think of purity, whiteness, whitening process, colonial process, that doesn't have to do much with the real ancient Greece. Just bring this in your mind. Even the Parthenon was full of colors. The columns of the Parthenon were striped: gold, fuchsia, black, white. Even Greeks cannot see this, but that's the reality. The sculptures, forget about it. Lipstick, gold clothes, you know, much more if you've seen sculptures or if you've seen images about Mexico. I mean, we were closer to that, just to remind. Then Kunsthalle Athena, we thought we started with an exhibition. We had no money. We came with an equation in our mind that was, we thought that, what if love was a currency? We were influenced about that because around us there were about 300 illegal prostitution homes where, unfortunately, there was another kind of currency in love, and we wanted to find also, like, it was women that necessarily had their passports with them, you know, they were like sort of used by their employers, and we thought, okay, let's find a way to become another sort of a prostitution home within here, with this institution, and find a way to somehow think of the love as a currency, but from the positive side. And we thought, okay, we have nothing, but how many euros, like we have €0 right now, but how many euros we would give for one love, for one good love, for one love forever? It's a very strong currency, love. So we thought, okay, let's think it that way. We have lots of love for each other and for the art. No euros can buy that. What can we do to become rich is make a huge network. How can we be free to make this huge network? In the beginning, by denying any kind of little money. There is a price to everything, of course. And if somebody was clever enough, as the state, let's say, or somebody else, to think how much money we really need to run an institution as such, he could, you know, offer us the amount. But if not, love is a much stronger currency. Of course, there was no one around. Also, we thought, like, why to press the state so much when the hospitals, still they don't, but back then they didn't have syringes, they didn't have alcohol. It was like a very, very serious condition because everything was uncovered, the corruption, and like really the hospitals didn't have plasters. I mean, now they're starting to have, I mean, they're great doctors in hospitals, but they have no money for the material. So we thought, okay, and we invested in loaves. How we made our love bigger? By inviting artists to this ruin. We kept the ruin as it was. You have, one of the images is this woman. I don't know if it shows well, that it is somehow distilling. This is Kunsthalle Athena. This is before Kunsthalle Athena started. And it's the artist Ylva Ogland. Now she's named Ylva Snöfrid. And a Swedish artist. Love brought her in our premises, and she has another personage that is called Oracle. She's been working with this kind of fake identity of the Oracle. We thought, let's ask a Swedish Oracle, as opposed to the Greek Oracle, if Athens needs a Kunsthalle. And part of her project is that she makes liquids, like illegal alcohol. So she said that the answer would be in that drink. She's going to be distilled in the yard where later Kunsthalle became, but she wanted the whole team of Kunsthalle to participate in this distilling, which lasts many days and hours. I'm telling you, I don't know if you ever distilled alcohol, and also overnight, and there is a huge responsibility because you can poison everybody if you do wrong. And so share no really, you can make people blind, you know, and so share the responsibility with her while discussing if Athens needs a Kunsthalle. And after that, I don't know, yeah, this is her, but you see, after that, we made a sort of a bar. I mean, we were there, day and night, you know, helping this process. And after that, we made a bar. You see people serving. Around is this press release, like around the bottle and the theoretical text. And we invited different theorists giving these lectures if Athens needs a kunsthalle or what is a kunsthalle, and then you can have a shot. We got a little drunk, yes, it was 90% of alcohol, but very clean. So nobody got sick, no headaches, and you had a private kind of interaction with the theorist, and you have to hear like a 10-minute private lecture if you wanted to have, and if you wanted a second lecture. Yeah, so this is how it started. These are, I will go fast with the images so you understand how it worked, how we built an institution. The main factor was, as I told you, no money, somehow preserve the ruin, so people understood. People understood very well that we have no money, we didn't pretend to be rich, so they were coming from all over the world without asking to be paid. It was a kind of united, I don't know, nations, or like a kind of solidarity, let's put it that way, but trying to do good things. It's in an area in Athens where it's populated by mostly the prostitution homes, but also lots of immigrants, and at the same time lots of drugs. This goes all together. So we're in a very, very precarious area. Our world was like, actually, we were neighbors with houses where people were being raped. So we thought about all this, rape meaning the prostitution, and how to make our program. We had, where you see the people jumping, we had this kind of elevated balcony, but it was as big as a square, and all these apartments around of people that would never dare to go to an art institution, either because they were locked in to work as prostitutes, or because there is this kind of transparent walls, you know, between the two worlds. So we were catering a program in that yard so they could see from their balcony, or here. You see also a Mathieu Loret piece that was given to us, where it says, let's make lots of money. It's an actual art piece. It comes with, I mean, collectors have bought it. It comes with authenticity and all this. And it's like a kind of instructions that you have to write this in the wall and sit in front of it for some hours per day. So you make lots of money eventually. And then you have a kind of a Brancusium column on the other hand side, which is a work by Andreas Angelidakis. This is our beginning, you know, and it was next door to our Kunsthalle. It was this shop of this woman that was ready to get pension by selling, I mean, she was in the end of her working years, and she was selling this kind of second-hand furniture, but as the crisis hit, she couldn't sell anything. So Andreas thought to make an agreement with her and to make this kind of infinite column that people could come and buy individual pieces in the prices she gave, and every time the furniture were sold within the art, you know, kind of platform, they were, how you say, they were new furniture put on top until she sold all the shop, and she managed within half a year. You know, we got lots of people. We got about 35,000 people within 10 shows. I mean, it was a big, we thought it would be one show, but then unfortunately, or fortunately, we had to go on for 5 years. It was a kind of labor of love, but also love of labor in the end. And we had 2 shows, 1 or 2 shows per year, because the roof was leaking, so in the winter we couldn't operate. You see different, but if I go to one by one, it will be lots of performative events, and always the shows left a trace to the next one coming. This is the premises how it was. For example, the show was called "This Must Be the Place." There was always a reference to the situation of Greece, not like a pornographic, how I call it, reference, but a reference that let's now focus in that place, in the place where we are. Of course, lots of references to the economy, and because we were trying, so it became a kind of a gathering, and at the same time a kind of collective therapy, team therapy, around the absurdity that we all found ourselves in, the economical crisis. This is how the yard worked, and how you see like the different windows with the lights where people could look down. What is kind of interesting, and you can read about that, because we were fortunate to have as a witness a very good writer that wrote something very good, very kind of sentimental and important about us in Art Agenda. When we were about to close, the reason why we closed was because the building the person that was providing us this ruin could not provide it to us anymore. He was going even to sell the ruin. And so, but it was also okay because working 5 years in a ruin, a complete ruin, was extremely difficult. You know, the walls were falling apart. Nobody could secure the works. I mean, we have a work by Apostolos Georgiou here, the painting, for example, which cost, let's say, I give like an iconic price, 30,000 euros, but we still had to have it inside there. The building was extremely penetratable, but the way we find to protect ourselves is like we invited actually who could have been our burglars to work with us. And so we were very protected. Yeah, everyone, like the junkies community, were giving different tours, immigrants, everyone that could have been our potentials, because they needed the cash, immediately became part of the institution. So they all protected on that way. We could even leave the door open. During our last event, which was an event under the title We Will Meet Again, we decided to have the Kunsthalle open for 5 days nonstop, like 24 hours a day, because it was so much. By that time, for example, we were a team of 4 people. Let's say I was the leading factor in this, but I'm only because of my age, and some younger curators. And at that time, there were even people coming to me as I was sort of being older and being more recognizable, telling me, oh, Ms. Fokidis, you're also in Kunsthalle Athena. How nice that you know the space. And then we understood that the space has a lot of powers. They didn't anymore associate the space with the individuals behind it. And this was our ultimate climax. This was the apotheosis of our endeavor. And during these 5 days that it was constantly on and people were talking and somehow saying goodbye to Kunsthalle Athena, and there was a big drama. It was also the day that we were starting these 5 days, it was also the day that somehow the cultural capitals happened in Greece. It happened overnight, which means that a Sunday night, you went to your bank with your card, you put your card and nothing works. And there was no public announcement until the next morning that said, look, we're having this situation, cash is stopped here, we don't know how it's gonna resolve. The next day, you had lines outside the banks. The banks were closed for a week, closed, completely locked. All people crying. You know, imagine what happens to a state when cash disappears and you don't know what is going to happen. People fainting in front of the bank. So it was that night that was like a war. It was this morning that happened, and we were starting Monday, and it was like a war. And I said to my team, younger people, it's always good to work with younger people, guys, and girls, let's not do this. We have to close, you know, we should not open, like no one will come. And they told me, no, it's the opposite. But I said, look, there is no car moving. It was like really a war. You were expecting that the next day will be a war. That's what we were expecting. And actually, it was a day that we had maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people that all of a sudden, this is an image by that day, all of a sudden people were coming out of the houses needing to be in that 5 days absurdity of discussing without sleeping and partying and discussing and partying, and somehow to exhaust this pain of uncertainty. Now we're going a bit to the magazine that I'm going. It's interconnected. The magazine was called South as a State of Mind. It's connected with 2 things I discussed with you. Somehow this kind of criticism on identity politics. Who are we? How can we define ourselves, our space, our topography, our time, when even our folk dress is a political propaganda by a foreign country to our country, or whatever this means. And also to the need of having an institution, having an agency. Since we formed a team with Kunsthalle Athena, and since we didn't have a permanent job, but we did all kinds of other jobs, from waitressing to, you know, lectures and this, whatever you could find, like to make your monthly fee. But we couldn't operate in Kunsthalle Athena in the winter because I told you it was leaking. We thought that we're going to continue the program in a magazine. How are you going to open a magazine? Again, with love and the currency of love. It was the answer of my team. And I thought, yeah, maybe. Again, it's a strong currency, as we said. So we went to the most successful free press of Athens that they have I mean, they were successful at that time. They were also shaking, but still. And we asked for an office and the printing. Immediately they said yes, and that they would be, no money. Like we promised, like never involve money anymore. We have the strongest currency. So we sold our love for them, and we got love back. And that's how we started. And I remember that for 3 or 4 months, we were going in this office, in this kind of like weekly free press. They wouldn't understand what we were doing. Like it was almost like where reportage is becoming an industry, just discussing about the names and looking at each other and making maps like the one you see. And they were like, guys, are you crazy? Like, why you come here and you look at each other? And we thought that the name would have been the most important thing. The name of the magazine would have been the most important thing that we can think, and then everything else will come. So it took us 3 months. We gave 3 months to ourselves, and we thought of South as a state of mind for 2 reasons. But it worked as a name, I have to say. It helped us a lot. At that time, Greece was part of this new unofficial union that was decided again by more Central European entities that was called PIGS. Have you heard of PIGS? In Financial Times, it was called it PIGS. In the European Parliament, it was called it PIGS. In the European Bank meetings, it was called it PIGS. And PIGS meant Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. I mean, it sounds funny, but if you are a country that is struggling and you don't, and if you're even an individual that doesn't know if you're going to pay your rent the next month, and being called PIGS on top of everything, going, in Germany for a work in Berlin, and even the taxi driver will call you, oh, you're a part of PIG, get out, do you have cash on you? It's not so funny, it's not so funny. So we thought, okay, and also it was a kind of a period, but we thought everything we're gonna turn it to love, we're gonna use everything that the universe is offering to us. Where all of a sudden Europe was divided to North and South. And never before we thought as Greece as South European. We always thought we are Eastern Europeans, Southeast, but not this kind of South. Of course, why? It took us a while to understand, but of course, the reference was to the global South, to the colonized, non-humans, as you say, and the idea, it was a diminishing term, the South, So we said, yeah. Actually, yes, this is it. We are the South. Now we have a big family under the equator. Maybe we always belong to that family, and we are by mistake in that hostile other family. So we thought that we're being possessed like in reality, not with money anymore, as we were being dispossessed, but we were possessed by a spirit of authority, and we're going to change the world according to Southern principles. And that's how South as a state of mind came in our mind. Enough of this Western thinking, we thought. Of course, this was a kind of a self-mockingly idea to put a criticism on this kind of prevailing Western thinking, prevailing sort of ideas of enlightenment, more Protestant ideas than we could afford in our bodies. And that's how South as a state of mind started. Many people thought in the beginning that it was somehow focusing on the global South, where it was, but not so much because the global South in itself is also a colonial project, like feminism is. I'm not saying they're bad. Of course, it helped. Global South helped all the people that they share colonial stories to emancipate themselves, but it was thought by Dutch theorists. They put the restrictions in English. You are under the equator, so all of you are called Global South. Because, it's always nice to give names and geographical restraints, because that's the way the rest, the little rest, the capital rest, can somehow control the others. As long as you're under the equator, fine. Don't come to my neighborhood, Stay there, poor you. So we thought, no, let's drop this barrier too. South as a state of mind started in 2012. Became the magazine, as you see on the left, of Documenta 14, to which I was the head of the artistic office and part of the curatorial team, the head of the artistic office in Athens, but it was only one artistic office, only in Athens. And I will talk to you about it in a minute. And so all of a sudden it was adopted by very rich parents, but also paid by the ones that was for a long time, you know, it's kind of also kind of an exercise, you know, to be somehow at the same time calling Southerns the pigs, but also pay for their magazine, you know, South is a state of mind. It's nice, you know, you feel good. Yes, yes, we are the pigs, but, you know, give us something to eat, you know, and more than what you thought. And now, of course, after the Documenta ended, which is like this chapter in Cinderella where the chariot becomes pumpkin again, but that's life, you know. We continue to exist, and we are doing right now, as we speak, a kind of a tetralogy. Like we were always coming from 2012. It's a biannual magazine from 2012 to 2015. In the beginning, where Documenta adopted it, it was 5 issues in a more kind of trying to quite theoretical, but we were trying back then to somehow refer to this kind of idea of pornography and popular culture. So we took the size and the paper from Playboy magazine and trying to somehow imitate this while offering hardcore theory. Of course, in Documenta, this couldn't be continued. And also it had to somehow reflect the ideas of the whole curatorial team. So we thought, as I was the editor-in-chief, to leave this job as editor-in-chief and become something else to Documenta, and to play with this idea that a small grassroots magazine / institution is hosting Documenta 14 in its pages. And then now we are again independent with much less money. It's kind of difficult because we have to keep a standard that was somehow developed within Documenta, but you know, with a budget of maybe 60,000 per issue, you know, or something like that, and 2 issues per year. And we have this tetralogy that we called, again, thematically, maintenance. The first issue, the issue that you see there, and it already were circulated. The second will be economy, so how to maintain, how to make an economy, but the word economy comes from the Greek oikonomy. Oikos means house, and so oikonomy means householding. Then it will be coexistent. No, the second is coexistence that is coming now, then economy, and then cultivation. And coexistence is how to maintain, how to be together, how to make an economy, and cultivation is, let's say, the green issue, but not exactly, how to cultivate bridges. Just so I show you an idea on how we played with Documenta before and after, the maintenance issue, which is on the left-hand side, you see the editorial of the maintenance issue, and 2 of us that is writing the editorial coming from this kind of curatorial team of Documenta. And on the left-hand side, the image is like an owl that flew. This issue had inside a poster with an owl that is dead. On the right-hand side, you see the logo, one of the logos of Documenta, which was after the idea of the movement that an owl can make with the hand, 360%. So imagine Documenta now that I will speak to you about in a minute becomes bilocational, so schizophrenic, so, and also looking the world from down up and not from up down. So one of the designers, of the 4 designers that worked for Documenta, thought of this logo of the owl, and then the owl left. So we played a lot. So, okay, up to here, because we're changing chapter. We have a question. Then next issue will be, as we speak, is going to the printer almost, so it will be out by the beginning of November. Yes, you know the issue, that's nice. So, and I can also send it by PDF. It was not exactly related to the Berlin Biennial. What we did, just so I repeat for the rest to know, was that we did an exchange with the Berlin Biennial, is this kind of love currency situation, and also a little bit the score of Documenta, that we gave some pages to the public program of Berlin Biennial, and and they gave us space to their public program. So we exchange these pages with space, but not advertising. So the public program of Berlin Biennial was announced in a kind of a project within 10 pages in our magazine, and we invited an artist in collaboration with Gabin Gobo, which was from Johannesburg, which was the artist was from Johannesburg, but also the curator is from Johannesburg of the Berlin Biennial, Koleka Putumba, to make a performance during our launch in Berlin, a poet. And we had the poems he wrote about all the black female poets that suicide, not only black, female poets that suicide. The poem was, we commissioned a poem and she read this poem in a place where May Ayim, another black female poet, suicided in Berlin. So that was, this year, this issue, we are collaborating with Bamako Encounters. It's a photographic biennial in Mali. The magazine will be launched in Mali. So we somehow play a little bit with the idea of who is going to be the guests in this. People told us, but why you're launching it in Mali? Who is going to be there? Well, many, many people, you know, because many people go to these encounters, local people. So why it has to be always launched in Europe, you know? Maybe I will not be able to go. It depends if we manage to have funding or not. But it's okay, you know, the magazine can go. And so we are having also the ideas that are behind this 12th edition of Bamako Encounters in our pages, in 10 pages or 12, and some works, and the magazine will be, and we will continue this with every issue, with all 4 issues.
It's like what you said in the beginning, like questioning of the space and time of the exhibition, that's right. So actually the magazine is continuing the exhibition in a different form.
Yeah.
It goes out from the space and the time of the exhibition itself.
Yeah, actually I would say it's exactly as you say, but just to make it even more precise, not continuing, it's in symbiosis.
Part of it.
It's part of it. It's in symbiosis with, because it's extending, let's say, or not, but it's being at the same time. And this is a kind of freedom that we gave to ourselves. Like, for example, when you have an institution, a space, like you have some restrictions when you try to do your program, so many square meters, white walls or black walls, and you know, there are these restrictions. The same with the magazine. It's like so many pages, this is the size, but we didn't put ourselves that it's another medium. Like, no, it's, as you say, it's also a kind of an exhibition. It's a kind of, we thought about it, a kind of a public space. As much as a room with an exhibition is a public space, the magazine is a public space on itself. It's a space. So on that question, what is a space? A magazine is a space too. And a space also that bypasses geographic borders more easy, let's say, than other spaces. But it's not so easy either, because, you know, to send the magazines from here, there, to there, it's also a kind of a situation. I mean, it endeavors a lot of money, like real money in that time. Not that love, like, you know, we have not developed yet love with the distributors or the post office. I wish, you know, if they understand the world, we'll meet so much better, but with them, we have not developed this love, so we need to pay with this other currency. And that's kind of, you know, problematic sometimes. I showed you this before, and now Documenta, because I wanted to tell you that this, these independent efforts, as Kunsale Athena, as South as a State of Mind, as Athens Biennial, as ICA here in Sofia, and many, many others, but let's be grounded and refer to the ones that are around us, is what led Documenta 14 to come in Athens. Documenta 14 didn't wake up one day and said, we are coming to Athens. So this is even a bigger investment. You see, when you invest in love, you receive a kind of love, you know? That's what I'm trying to say. It's extremely important, because many times you say, oh, and now what? Well, you know, not because I had a personal relationship with Adam or Simchik or somebody else, but yes, of course it helps, but Adam Szymczyk, and any Adam Szymczyk, you know, was visiting Athens also partially because his partner is half, 1/4 Greece, but also because these endeavors, Kunsthalle Athena, Athens Biennial, I mean, I'm telling you the ones that really were active, South as a State of Mind, managed to somehow share a reality, a bleak reality, of course, internationally, which doesn't mean anything, again, in terms of, oh, international, better than the local, no, but to share it beyond our confined space. So Adam, for example, approached Athens with this question, I remember in the very beginning, before even I knew about the document, how can you make it? Like, how can the whole country, because of course, as you understand, Athens became extremely famous in the media as the black sheep of Europe, and this complete destruction, but how can you continue? Like, how can you, where do you find the energy? And then slowly, this curiosity developed a kind of a learning from Athens idea, you know, which meant, of course, many other things, not only this, because Documenta is an international, but the initial idea is like, let's learn. So in a way or another, he compared the post-traumatic stage or shock of the Second World War with the post-traumatic shock of crisis, economical crisis in Greece. He is not the only one to compare. The Humboldt University, for example, found out that there is a common pathology to the people after the Second World War, that they were continuing hearing bombing, even if bombing didn't exist and they were running to hide, to Greek people that they emigrated in other places in Europe to work, but the problem there was that they went out to work and somehow bring the money back where they had loans in Greece, but the only problem was that their location was the same expensive, even more than the location they were working. So the money, it's not exactly how it was with the Gastarbeiters. The money was not enough to pay your life in Germany and pay your life of your family in Greece, because Greece is even more expensive. I mean, Athens is a bit more expensive than Berlin, you know, or the same. But the people make like 100 times less. You know, it's very peculiar, this situation. So they developed this pathology that Humboldt University Hospital thought that it's the same sort of pathology with the post-war, that they hear the phone, they think that somebody's coming to take the house, you know, everything that you own, this kind of like very violent dispossession. I'm not saying we are the only ones to have this. It was just very, very sudden. Like, it was very unexpected, no preparation period to this. Now we know. Now it's different. You know, now it's been like 8 years that you live this. So we know what is going on. Like, you know you can survive with uncertainty. But back then you think, no. Like, how can I survive without a job, with a loan, with rent, and you know, like, it's not possible. But now, of course, it is. There is often, in Greece, for example, that nobody knew what Documenta is, which is actually kind of very interesting. There was always a kind of an idea that a German organization, Documenta 14, decided to come and do something in Greece. And so a second level of colonization. But that's not actually at all the reality. What happens very fast with the Documentas is that they ask several people to put down very extended proposals, 30 pages proposals, about the next Documenta. Then they select 2 or 3 people, and then they select one. Within 3 or 4 days, a jury that is independent to the German organization. I mean, it is, of course, somehow put together by the organization, but whatever this jury decides, the organization has to follow. Adam was even asked, I think, this is an anecdote, but it happened after he was elected with his proposal of this bilocational, completely bilocational Documenta in Athens and in Kassel at the same time. He was also asked that, or suggested that if he changed his mind, it's fine. Like he said, they even said to him, look, this is very difficult. If you change your mind and you want to do it only in Kassel, it's okay with us. Of course, he didn't. Or then when they saw that this is somehow going forward, then they said, okay, maybe out of the 30 million, let's say, budget, 3 will go to Greece. That they didn't say. We had to obey this. 3 will go to Greece, and the rest. But then, of course, it was a battle, because the proposal was not a satellite, as it has been happening before. It was a sharing. How could you put Mr. Schäuble at the time, being so mad with the Greek government, to share, you know, kind of public money with, you know, it was very difficult. Also, what the Greek taxpayer think, that, you know, like there is a kind of suspicion. So we felt in Documenta 14 that our work started immediately with the first day that the office started. Even more so when the artists came, like it was a constant renegotiation of the rules. First of all, the artistic director moved in Greece. Second, the artistic office happened in Greece, so the CEO had, and everyone from the office in Kassel had to move to Athens to go back and forth to negotiate about administration and economy. So the German subject had to learn from Athens how to administer. It's kind of a play out of codes. Then also the other thing that happened was that we had to find ways that the budget will be distributed equally, maybe through different tricks, and, you know, by paying the office, we had to find many ways in the structure. The other thing was that we have 2 cities, a very small city, Kassel. I think there is about 200,000 inhabitants, where Documenta, which brings about 1 million visitors, comes as a dot. If it was a dot in the map, is bigger than the city. That's what. And then you have a 5 million inhabitant city, Athens, where Documenta, yeah, might bring about 1 million, with lots of worries also, that nobody really cared, you know? So you were going to ministries and there, like the organization, or to different entities, and they would say, Documenta, what's that, you know? And why it's important. That might sound as a difficult process, but actually it was not. It also shaken up a little bit the foundations of an institution like that. You know, I mean, they were extremely annoyed, the people, even the curatorial team, going around and saying, we're going to be the curators of Documenta, and people asking them, and so, what is this? And that was kind of interesting to see these analogies. Very, very soon in the process, Adam decided that it will be, I mean, you can read part of his text here, how he thought about it, that it will be a kind of a mirroring, 2 images, but these images will never be identical, you know, and we put ourselves in this kind of very difficult, very, very difficult endeavor of making actually 2 documentas. In the beginning, we wanted that they be exactly at the same time, but then we realized we cannot cut ourselves and be here and here. In the opening, what do you do? Where do you go? Then we divide them in time, and they overlap for 1 month. There was a very big worry from the castle part that they would lose the tourists, which was actually the opposite happened. They had much, much more people than normal. So in the very first weeks, Adam was portrayed as a caricature in the local newspaper being hung in the central square. And we were not welcomed at all. By the mayor, yes, a lot, but not by the hotels. Oh my God, they hated us. The Greeks, they were like, oh, the Greeks are coming, but in the end, this love became. Like love happened there, not in an administration level, the love dissolved there, but in the kind of citizens level, it was like really, because so many people like gastarbeiters, that they have restaurants, they felt more emancipated. It was a kind of a very good mix. Also, it was successful in terms of people. Another thing that it was part, let's say, of our concept was to open up the airport in Kassel that never was operated. So during the overlap period, they didn't want to keep it afterwards. There was a plane bringing people from Athens to Kassel, and, you know, and that was really nice. We even thought at a certain point to fill up the plane with immigrant, you know, people, refugees, but of course this will never happen, that want to leave Greece, you know, because who wants to stay in Greece, but no. It was a bit difficult on that way, but other, you know, it was a kind of a circulation. with an airport that it's never open. I mean, part of our idea was to open up this airport, for real. Part of another idea was to extend the Documenta, or to put the main venue of the Documenta, not in Fridericianum, where it usually is, a sort of neoclassical museum that was built after the war, again, Second World War, but in the Nordstadt, that I have to say I didn't know so well. I mean, I knew a little bit by the Documenta after Oquis 11, oh no, 12. But the Nordstadt, I mean, Kassel is extremely segregated, completely the opposite than Athens, extremely segregated. So all the immigrants and refugees live together, all the immigrants, in this Nordstadt. It's so small also, you can only walk, which is in the other side of the river, let's say, and looks much more like Athens, and not like this boring, you know, like Germanic city. I mean, nice also, but it looks completely different than the castle we know through Documenta. So our main venue, one of the main venues was there, a big post office, ex-post office, or, you know, premises of a post office. Why I have the right image is to show you also, as we started speaking about cliches and national identities in ancient Greece, I want to show you one of the first kind of an intellectual that we based our ideas with South, but also later with Documenta, and we repeat the same article in the first ever South, but also in the first South of Documenta that gave birth to other ideas. This is a guy, a poet that died very young in Greece, and it was called Yorgos Makris, an artist, poet, writer, and that similar to, sorry that I keep a lot of suicide, but it's kind of very, in my story, it's a lot. This guy, like most of the modernist intellectuals in Greece, committed suicide. It happened, like the architects. It's a kind of a post-Byzantine environment that doesn't accept modernity so easily, Greece. And he, together with other intellectuals, just after the Second World War, he came up with the idea to bomb the Parthenon, not for real, of course, not with bombing material. They created this team that it was called the Saboteur of the Archaeological Monuments, the Saboteurs, and they made a manifest, and they gave up the reasons why Parthenon, or something like Parthenon, should be bombed. I mean, the epitome of these reasons was that Parthenon will be the excuse for every atrocity that will be happening under it, as everything else. Also, it will be the symbol of nationalism. Also, it will be the absolute, like, let's say, magnet to tourism. And the real city and the real people will be forgotten in its roots, something like that. And that was actually very telling. This guy was never appreciated, because imagine after like the war, like you need to boost the national identity again. At the same time, there was another person that now his name escapes me, but it will come, very known, part of the left of the Communist Party in Greece, that went up with his colleagues and put the Greek flag on top of Parthenon. What's his name? Which, as you can understand, he had an excellent career with every political party. He became one of these kind of old politicians, wise men of Greece. But he changed many times, from communist to left, to slight left, to right, wherever he could put the flag on, he would go. So is this, we then brought together Makris with like exchange ideas with, also like as we were exchange ideas with another person from older artist, still alive, of course, from Argentina. You have it's in your left, and her name is Marta Minujín. And Marta Minujín did this Parthenon of Books in Argentina in the late 70s, beginning of 80s, when they had democracy again, where she asked all the people to uncover, to bring all their censored hidden books that were in Buenos Aires, and did a kind of a Parthenon in the central square with these books that now could see the light. And we thought that that's a kind of an interesting analogy to put together. A Parthenon made of marble that should be bombed, and a Parthenon that is constructed by censored knowledge. I'm just giving you how easy sometimes like these things started. So the first time our door ever opened to the public, which was with our public program that was curated by Paul Persiado, but the idea of how it was this image that you have in your right, I guess. And this is when the first, this is before Documenta, but for us it's not before Documenta, because for us the Documenta started with our office, and also the public program has thousands and thousands of people, and it started in operating in Athens 2 years before the official opening of Documenta. What you see is like a piece by architect Andreas Angelidakis, a soft ruin, as we call it. He called it Demos, a municipality. And basically, it was the sitting device of this space that you see on your right if you arrange it. But they looked like concrete, but they were so light, so people could move it and put it according to how they wanted. So we took the idea and the score of Georgios Makris. We somehow bombed our stereotypes, and we let people rearrange it in the way they want to have it every time they were visiting the space. The space that looks like undone a bit is a municipality gallery, but actually it was the headquarters of the dictatorship police, where lots of people have been tortured in Greece. Everyone, apart from the dictatorship, kept and tortured. And it was used by the municipality as a white cube for exhibitions. And we thought, okay, we're going to use this space for renegotiated, for redefinitions, renegotiations, discussions for our public space, public program space. And we undid, like we opened the wall, like when you see halls, it's because we open up this white cube to the windows, and we brought its history alive. This is how it was operating. You have on your right hand side how people were sitting on this arrangement. This is, I think, the opening where you see Paul Persiado, Andreas Angelidakis, and oh my God, who wrote? Antonio Negri, yes, that came to open up our. And at the same time, I counterput this image with a stencil that was operating that days when we opened. This is a stencil that was all over the street, also in front of our offices when the public program and all our things started. That was put by people in Greece, and it was signed indigenous. So that says, "Dear Documenta, I refuse to exoticize myself to increase your cultural capital. Sincerely, the indigenous." And we thought to take this very seriously in consideration, because it was kind of a message to us. They tell us that they don't want to exoticize themselves, somebody says, in order to increase our cultural capital. And it signs the indigenous. So we took many parts. First, not to make exotization, like no pornography whatsoever, of Greek crisis, because that's what they're telling us. Like, what it will be, how could you exoticize Greece? By taking, let's say, photos of new homeless, because that was the exotic thing right there, and taking all this kind of misery and put it on a pedestal. Second, it was signed the indigenous. And then we started on a discussion, who is the indigenous of Greece? Are they indigenous in Greece? And then it was when we came with the idea to somehow involve, I mean, this was a little bit before the public program, to somehow involve indigenous people, indigenous curator Candice Hopkins, and brought the subject of indigeneity within Documenta, because maybe there are some parallels that Greek people feel towards indigenous, you know, because it's a wrong use of the word. Like Greek are not indigenous, Greek born in Greece are not indigenous. Indigenous means before the state, the land. Well, it's like that. Indigenous, not nationals, not inhabitants, I mean, in Greek at least, but also in English, then when we discuss with indigenous. The indigenous people had the land. The Pomakes are the indigenous in some parts of Greece, for example, not the Greeks. They were preceding, and they kept their places. For example, it's a big debate. So we invited who was the indigenous of Europe, for example, Samis from the northern Europe, and you have one of their leaders in this kind of costumes. Of course, American, indigenous, lots of Native Americans. And because, you know, Greeks were not colonized by another. Like the Germany, yes, colonized in a kind of a knowledge, the indigenous. They tried to domesticate them, but they didn't dispossess them from their land. Maybe now they're going to, but they haven't done it within history, you know, as you do with the Samis or the Native Americans or with the Pomakets or, you know, with this. And so what I'm trying to say is that we are in a dialogue. We were in a dialogue. Also, for example, during the preparation period, this is also some images that I show you. In one hand, you see Georgia Sagri, performance artist that danced 24 hours, a dance of somehow clearing the spirits of torture, but by torturing herself, you understand that if you dance for 24 hours, like literally she did, 23 actually, you can't walk anymore. It's a kind of an endurance. But it was also a rhythmic dance. And on the right-hand side is, because we were using many buildings in Athens, the documenta was extremely spread out in the city to the point that you couldn't see it even in 10 days, but that was deliberate. Actually, it came with a kind of a score I used in Thessaloniki Biennial. Like it was deliberate to get lost in this third space of Michel Serre between the places and not see the works, even if you had an agenda to tick. It was impossible. Like really, we calculated. It was impossible to go from one space to the other, because if it was, we would extend it more. And then you have this kind of walks. We joined some walks of the left archives of Athens, because we use a lot of buildings that they were somehow tied to the left history, and they're doing this kind of walks for people in the city. So every artist and every people that they were coming from for research, they were joining this kind of left archives walk. Why you see so many people? Of course, it's like we had another, I don't know if I have an image with this, but it's kind of important. We had another kind of dimension, and we invited somehow under the, of course, all these are ideas of Adam Simcik in discussion with the team, us. We invited almost all the artists together at the same time in Athens. So it was a kind of a hidden public event. No visitors were allowed. All artists were invited in this kind of polytechnic school, where it's this school that the Greek resistance happened, and this door that went down with a tongue, and people, students, to do there the kind of meeting. And the only people that they were allowed to be part of every meeting with every artist, but they were almost public meetings, because the other artists are almost audiences, you know, when you have 80 people together. Very, very hard, but it worked, were the students of the fine art. So the students of the fine art had carte blanche to be in every meeting and meet the artist, and also we asked the artist to prepare a kind of a public presentation for the rest of the artists. And they could stay many, that's how we spent, I mean, we get over budget, but that's how we spend the money in the end. On the right-hand side, these are different public, like let's say what you see as a performance on the left-hand side is almost like part of this kind of private meetings with the students, like artists were presenting not what they're gonna do, but what they wanted to present to others on performative ways. The idea also was that each artist will do 2 works, one in Kassel and one in Athens, if they want. And they did, of course, most of them. Very rarely, like in very small cases, you had the same work moving, or only videos, because and on the right-hand side, we recreated the Parthenon of Books by Marta Minuchin. I want to see if we have, the idea was that you have the Parthenon of Books in 1:1 scale, and next to it you have the Fridericianum. So all of a sudden, Athens is very prominent in Kassel. Fridericianum becomes small. We had many criticisms for this monument because it didn't look right, according to contemporary art standards. It didn't look beautiful. It looked too monumental. But I think in that criticism, something that escaped the mind of all was that it was a monument that was made by censored book all over the world. There were 100,000, of course, books in order to make it. Many many of the same copies. All over the world, you have books that they are censored. You can find the list in our sites, but even Harry Potter has been censored, you know, or books like that that you wouldn't accept. I think Mein Kampf was never censored. Or it was, but we didn't have copies. Where? I don't remember, but I think, in Austria it was censored, Mein Kampf? It still is? That's weird. Yes, also the previous politic. I mean, it's the birth of pre-Nazism. And Mein Kampf is, what a performative action to, you know, are you sure? That's weird. Okay, so no copies of Mein Kampf, because we were looking for it, and nobody sent this, because we didn't ask. I mean, we were asking, but people were sending also. The interesting part also is that this monument, because they say, yeah, so much money spent for a monument that doesn't exist, but it does exist. Not there, but in everyone's home, because during the dismantle period, we had people could take the books. Marta Minuchin, I mean, she's almost 80 years old. She signed many copies, not everything, but they were like inside this kind of plastic thing, almost like looking like an artwork. It was for the rain. So the monument exists. It just exists dissolved in private homes. It doesn't mean that the monument has to have an entity as a whole. And so this was our answer to the bombing of Parthenon that you see in the public space and to the rebirth of it and its dissolvance in private homes. I will not go to other monuments that I wanted to show you. I will only go to here to end my presentation with this. This was another of the monuments that we had, monumental works by Olu Ogibe, the artist from Biafra, I mean, quite known artist, curator, theorist, and his idea was to make this obelisk in the central square of Kassel that says, has a quote by Matthew Chapples and says, I was a stranger and you took me in. Which this is like what Matthew says that Jesus said. It was in this square in Kassel where once Goethe was arrived, and it's the central where the trams are, and tried to find the hotel. It was very late at night. I mean, he writes, Goethe writes about it, that's how we know it. And no hotels will open for him. You have to understand that Kassel has a very strong story with non-tolerance to foreigners. This is where the Kristallnacht happened, you know. It's like a very, you know. And then at a certain point in one of the hotels, they asked him, but you speak so good German, how come? And Goethe said, but I am German. And that's how they allowed him to stay in a hotel that night. So we thought, okay, this is the, I mean, Olu thought that this is the place where he wanted his monument. I was a stranger and you took me in was written in Farsi, Turkish, English, and German, of course. And then this was the monument that we propose, as many documenta do, to stay, like to sell it to the city so they keep it forever. It was not so wanted. First, the idea was that the money were too many. So the artist decided that it was too expensive. The artist decided to make it much cheaper, so dropped it down to, let's say, almost 2/3 of its price. So it became a cheap work. But then again, it was not wanted so much. Or he was proposed to keep, that he could, that the city will buy this, but they want to move it to the Nordstadt. But this Nordstadt that I told you before. But this doesn't make any sense in the place where only immigrants live. So of course the artist decided no. And then the citizens protested. They did a crowdfunding, campaign. They found the money. So they said to their municipality, we want this and we want to have it. The municipality was already a little bit mad with Documenta 14 because we went over budget, and the IFD, do you know this party? The IFD had sued, imagine, a party, a political party has sued the artistic director and the CEO for using public money. In the end, of course, a private company came so that there was no discrepancy, but any kind of party of that ideology can sue. I mean, they find art because it's a good, easy publicity. And of course, the IFD called the sculpture degenerate art. I don't know if anyone speaks German, but I don't want to pronounce because my pronunciation is not good, and this term has not been used since the Nazi times, but that's how this sculpture was called. But nevertheless, it wouldn't move because the citizens didn't want it to move. And one day, before the 3rd of October a year ago, all of a sudden the sculpture disappears. No notification to the artist, no notification to anyone else. All of a sudden we got sent these images. The 3rd of October is the day of the unification of the two Germanies. And when the sculpture disappears and people went and put flowers there, of course, somebody, I mean, it's already a year after Documenta, and the artist gets confused, everybody, and they're trying to find out. And the official answer is, but we didn't want it to be destroyed, because that's where the celebrations of the two Germanies will happen. So they wanted to protect it. That was the idea. So without asking the artist, they just removed it from the square. Of course, because it was such a kind of a reaction by the citizens putting flowers like somebody has died and stuff, the sculpture had to come back to the city, but never to the square again. It went somewhere else, public, in some stairs. No, it's in public. It's also in a place where it's kind of prominent. The artist agreed, but it was very weird, this application of power. I mean, this sculpture was thought for this square. So you buy it for this square, that it could be removed whenever we want and removed in a kind, I mean, it's all telling. But nevertheless, I want to leave it here and read to you, because we all have been to this kind of in our life. I mean, it's not exceptional to Documenta. I'm sure you have plenty of stories here in Sofia with this, plenty of stories in Greece with this, but I want to read something that Olu written, and it's kind of, Olu the artist, it's kind of a good way to end this conversation, and to end my monologue and open up the conversation. And he writes, "The mirror is a window. It offers a glimpse of where we are from and cannot return. We are all travelers on this endless road, condemned to roar without repose." So I hope we're going to be continuing to roar without repose, or I wish at least, together. Thank you.
Just a very practical question. First of all, thank you for this beautiful lecture and the very inspirational job you've done with your team for Documenta, which still lives for me on the pages of the magazine. So it's going on. Anyway, my question is, what is going to happen with the ESMT now? EMST, yes. Yeah. So the appointment of the new director and change in the political circumstances in Greece last month.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, Documenta is continuing, as well as Kunsthalle, as well as the monument of Marta Minuchin in everyone's mind and homes. And yeah, it has affected a lot, for example, Kassel maybe, but Kassel is used to it, but a lot Athens. So, for example, because we are coming to EMST, which is the closed contemporary art museum of Athens, the closed contemporary art museum of Athens, that never opened since its initiation 21 years before in its entirety. I mean, it opened, some parts of it opened, but never as a functioning museum. Apart during Documenta, it came from an idea of Adam Simchik and the team to somehow exchange this building as a building, but symbolical entity, with Fredericianum, which is the central building of Kassel. So the Greek collection goes there and receives 1 million visitors. This was entirely an idea of Documenta. Sometimes it's reported differently, but it's not, it's like, it's part of our curatorial concept. And then Documenta happens in this closed museum because they had the funds, and that's why we were overboard, to open this museum. I mean, it's an operation that cost over 3 million to send the collection, to bring back the collection, to open a museum that has never opened. It cost about that money, you know. There is no love there so much. Or there is, but nobody believes you. And so the EMST opened and received about 700,000 people. Our wish was, or maybe our hope, or my hope, was that the works from Fridericianum will come directly to the floors of the EMST, and so the door will never close again. But the reason that this didn't happen, the official reason at least, was that there is no money for heating, cooling, all this, and so they couldn't do it, maybe. Now, what is going to happen? I don't know. You're going to have to ask the Greek newly appointed Minister of Culture and the team of hers. They tried, the previous government, to do an open call where many of us were applied and all of us were rejected on reasons of you know, like sort of more administrative reasons. For example, you had to be able to prove that you speak 2 foreign languages on top of yours, like of your native language, and you had to prove this through specific certificates that you get in foreign schools. But sometimes you just lived in another country or studied in another country, so you don't have the certificate from foreign language school. Things like that. So obviously, also it was a jury of only men with a like average age of 60-something. You know, one member of the jury was 92, another member of the jury was 89. You know, we're talking about a contemporary art museum. There is no women in the board. I mean, it's a very complicated story. So you almost felt that they don't want to open. I mean, it cannot be that. Now, as soon as the government changed, we heard in the very beginning that there will be no competition and they're going to appoint a director, but this changed. Then the previous government had done an interim director. He's a great modernist architect. I think he's also 88 or something like that. Another man, so the 8th, that he will enable the museum to open without a director, and a curator from a public museum of Thessaloniki is helping to the installation of what they call the museological study. Because this museum was thought in terms of a permanent presentation of a permanent collection. So, I don't know, I think first they have to dismantle this kind of law, because there is no permanent concept in that life we live. And there is no forever. So, now the last thing I heard is that the museum will open headless for the moment. I don't know, that's a new concept. I've never seen a museum opening with only, I've never seen a body walking without head, you know, or without toes, I don't know, like without missing one part. But maybe it's gonna work, maybe it's gonna work. And then they're gonna find somebody to direct it. You know, everything is uncertain, so I don't know. I mean, what I wish is that this door opens, or at least that artists go and occupy it, you know. I'm very, because Greeks know how to protest, so in that level, I was a little bit disappointed not to see this. But it's like that. I was discussing with somebody here, and we're saying, like, Greek citizens know how to protest very well, and usually they manage. Somehow in the visual arts, something happens and people don't collaborate to become one strong body. I don't know why. This is a mystery.
Hello, my name is Vera. I'm a curator, but I was also part of the chorus in Athens. And for me, your presentation brought lots of memories to the experience that I had with Documenta in Athens, being a chorus. So it was for me a very special time, because as much as I spent with the exhibition, I really loved the curatorial concept and the ideas and everything. So During the preparation process, there was a lot of conversation what's going to happen with Athens scene after the documenta, like especially the local artists and curators and students were very much interested or curious what's going to happen in the future. So can you say what do you think important happened, how the documenta changed the scene?
You bring me also memories because it was kind of a bigger discussion of how we're gonna go about the kind of, I mean, you know better, but I'm just saying for everybody, how we're gonna go about the sort of mediation of the exhibition. And some of the ideas, of course, it was mostly executed by the educational program, but some of the initial ideas before you do all this we had a wonderful curator of education, Sepa Karyama, I don't know if you, Claire Butcher, okay. I mean, we had wonderful people. But before that, the idea was this methectic idea, and the idea, or the brief was that we are not gonna develop a process of mediation to somehow say to people how to mediate, like really give to people how to mediate the show, but it's open to every member of the chorus. I hope this was kept until the end. There were many exercises how to be in public and be with the public, but what you're gonna say about the show, it was in the responsibility of every individual. So I have been, maybe we didn't cross or we did, I don't know, but I have been to some tours of the exhibition we put together that was completely different than what we were thinking, and it was extremely wonderful for us to, like, from different sides, from, like, maybe we thought it from downside up, but this was from up down, like, so it was really a big enlargement. I think for me the mediation of Documenta was as important as the making of it, because in the end, what stays is the story we say about something, the story we say about ourselves. So it was a very important, it's this kind of audiences that somehow reacts to the way we represent the core. You understand what I'm saying? We represent the people as curators and artists, but then there is the people that also, as another level, say to the people how they really want to be represented. It was a little bit like that, and it was important for us. Now, I think I mean, usually, to be very honest with you, I don't like personally, but that's personal, the idea of scenes. Athenian scene, Thessaloniki scene, Bulgaria scene. I don't so much believe in it. So I don't think in Athens there was one scene in reality. I think there was a fauna that was so much formed by private institutions, private collectors, institutions. Fortunately and unfortunately, we have very, very strong collectors in Greece, maybe among the strongest collectors in the world, but most of them are in the boards of Dia Foundation in the States, Guggenheim, and Tate, and New Museum, and they give a lot of money to this. So for the Greek, let's say, artists, and curators, it's always a struggle to be liked by these people, that they've been informing Greece, of course, about contemporary art in the lack of any museum. But who really educated the people in Greece on contemporary art is private galleries that took the part of, we have many private galleries that took the part of institutions and brought, and these foundations. And because these foundations, of course, let's say like Deste Foundation, which is a very important by Dakis Ioannou, but reflects, of course, the taste of one individual, the collector, which is, of course, the biggest collector of Jeff Koons, let's put it that way, the ultimate collector of Jeff Koons. But however, is perceived by the audience in the lack of any other public space as the idea of contemporary art for a very big period of time after the resistance and this kind of more political art that was somehow criminalized as boring. We had a lot of objects produced in Greece looking like Jeff Koons, but not referring to the locality. So objects, 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 because that was the education. Of course, why not? I mean, that's the stimuli. And this changed a little bit slowly, started changing. Before the Documenta, I think we found ourselves extremely tired, many of us, in the lack of a museum, if you are not having a private gallery, in the lack of, because none of these collectors collects Greek artists, in the lack of a strategy from the Ministry of Culture with a sort of more booming theater and dance scenes, because most of the money go there, and archaeological museums are thriving, and tourists that come, and nobody cares for visual arts. So you have this kind of smaller, but quite strong independent voices. As I was saying, Athens Biennial, Kunsthalle, Athena South, not many. And then Documenta comes and gives a score of this kind of bi-locational collaborations, and bi-national, and bi-border, like not taking, but city to city, right? It was not a Helleno-Germanic collaboration. It was, but that was not the idea. It was not learning from Greece. It was learning from Athens for different reasons also, because Athens is a symbolic state, name of a city, and what it means, democracy, blah, blah, blah. And so let's say if we gave a score was this kind of collaboration on location to location. The museum remained closed, but I think once more, and this time is the independent spaces that replaces the museum. After Documenta, we had almost more, if it lasted 100 days, we have more than 100 spaces, new spaces in Athens, smaller independent spaces, that they're mostly based in collaborations between Greek artists and non-Greek artists. One brings the economy, the other brings the knowledge, and then they merge in this methodic way. And so, like, really I've lost in count, you know, every week in Greece there are so many events happening. There are so many young people that they're going from event to the event. So if sometimes people, like the people that they want to, that they're disappointed one way or another because maybe they were not part, and, you know, we are a post-Byzantium place. I mean, this happens a lot, you know, we have this kind of tradition. But if they say, what remains? Look, the museum is closed. No, the museum is open, but it's just reincarnated in over 100 particulars. The form of the museum is there, you know, so this is what I think it remains. It remains a very, very, very strong network of love and exchange. Very strong.
Thank you.
Just I was struck by your reference from at the beginning about body, time, space, embodiment, and what is remaining, what is not. This is, I've realized that this is like actually the first, really the first Facebook, Instagram-based Documenta, because we're following after 2013, 2014, including up to the monument of Olu Gibe, all the postings, at least I was, all the scandals, all the photographs from both places. This is indeed, I mean, because it happens every 5 years and not every 2 years, the process of preparing these documents is left on Facebook. Yeah. It's forever.
That's true, and imagine our artistic, it happened that we had this kind of, you know, broadcasting, but it is true. It is true. It's kind of interesting, the social media. Let's hope how we are not going to become slaves into it, because then we're going to be immobilized completely. We won't be going, but you're right. You could follow it through all these messages, all this media. Yara, you want to do the last question?
No, there isn't time. And it's a long story about colonialism and antiquity and Greek art.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually a very good thought to think about it. Colonialism, Greek antiquity, Greek art, and I can add one more reference to this, the Black Athena book, which is by an archaeologist on the idea of Greek antiquity, but not white Greek antiquity. Okay, thank you.